feel free to throw stuff in into the chat, because if there are any specific case studies for any specific industries that I can give, I'm more than happy to do that. And I can see people throwing in URLs already, which is great. Let us know where you're calling from, what industry you're in, B2C, B2B, and I will have a quick look through as I chat. But just a little bit of an intro into Seek and myself, and why I might be able to give you some insight into the influencer marketing space. So with Seek Marketing specifically, lovely jewelry site there, I can see Helena. With the influencer marketing space, it's a one part of a kind of 360 digital agency, Seek. So we started in the social media space about nearly 4 years ago now, primarily in the hospitality space, and quite quickly kind of diversified into other industries, and found that a lot of the learnings that we got was actually, from other industries, and we were transferring, for example, the learnings from e-commerce into the hospitality space and into other industries. So one of the things I want to talk about today is actually not just the value of influencer marketing directly, but how it can actually link in with the other forms of marketing that you might have. So in terms of services, we look at social media in its entirety, so the management of social media and community management, SEO, which I do think there is a lot of crossover nowadays with the kind of influencer marketing space and the SEO space, so your organic Google rankings, paid, so any sort of paid targeting, whether that's your Google AdWords, your PPC, display, Facebook, Instagram, more recently Pinterest, TikTok, and the other types of platforms. Content creation, again, a lot of crossover with the influencer marketing space. Hi guys, yeah, any questions that you can think of, feel free to start putting into the chat. Like I said, content creation space, a lot of crossover there. And we do web development as well. So again, where are you actually sending that traffic, especially if it's in an e-commerce sense? Where is that going? So I think best thing to start off is, again, it's good for me to know who's in the call, mainly to know where to kind of pitch the complexity of what we're talking about. And I'm assuming a lot of the people on the chat haven't leveraged influencer marketing for their business yet, or maybe they are and aren't seeing any success, and we can talk through a bit of the different angles today. But I think one of the key things that people maybe need to kind of understand is, like, what is an influencer? So stripping it back to not just why you're doing it, but what is an influencer? So for us as an agency, it's anyone with a captive audience, and you'll see two different terms flying around. So influencer marketing, I think, can get a bit of a bad rap just because of some of the horror stories you hear within the influencer marketing space, whereas so they've kind of changed their own names, kind of content creators, or creators, if you like. So you'll see some of the kind of bigger agencies will say, we work with a lot of creators, but I actually think it's a really good name, because that is what they do. And typically a lot of the influencers, you'll find they actually create better content than the brands they're actually representing, and that's one of the reasons it can be attractive. But because people from all over the world, amazing. Great. And yeah, I think when you're looking at the value of an influencer, of course you've got to look at the market or the niche that they cover, but also what you're looking to achieve. So when you're thinking about running a marketing campaign, really try and focus on what you're trying to do. So if you're in the B2C space, of course demographics are going to come into play quite a lot. So where are the followers of a particular influencer? So just going back to my previous point, what is an influencer? So if you've got an influencer that's got a big following on Instagram, etc., obviously it's a more visual value. So you've got that tangible value of an influencer posting, tagging your product in. You may get the direct value of the traffic coming from that post. But for Seek, we've actually got a department that's focusing on outreach of different types of influencers. So I think the world of digital PR, influencer, and SEO are all kind of creeping together. What you'll find is some influencers, they won't just have that initial channel. So even today, you are an influencer in the creative space, in the marketing space. Right now, we're you know, it's a different captive audience, but you might not have a huge Instagram following or Pinterest following, etc. So I think you've really got to focus on where the value is in the influencers that you're looking to work with. Interesting influence for a food brand. Give me more information. It'd be great to know. So, are you selling a product online? Are you supplying restaurants? What level of influencers do you work with in the beginning? How to message the initial contact? What are the current payment structures? Great. Yeah, I'm going to go into that now. So, at the start of a campaign, I think if you're a startup business, you've got to consider what is that cost going to be. So, of course, the bigger you get as an influencer, you will typically start to work with a management company. So, when you're reaching out to an influencer, you need to be aware that if they are a kind of a macro influencer, a slightly bigger influencer with more followers, they might not be the only ones that are in that account. So, they're very likely to have the email contact is very likely to be managed by at least an assistant or maybe even management. So if you're looking at, for example, someone with a big YouTube channel, and there's the cluster of management agencies that effectively not own the influencer market, but definitely do play a part in it. Some of the larger influencers are self-managed, but very, very, very rarely. So Seek is, I'm the managing director of Seek. I've also co-founded a management agency. So we work with it's between 60 and 70 influencers on a daily basis, and we manage them. So I'll go into a bit of detail into what that entails in a minute. But you effectively might not be dealing with the influencer themselves, which I think is quite a crucial point to make. So what those managers are there to do is, number one, ensure that they're working with brands that are relevant to them, typically. Two, to protect their commercial proposition, so effectively get as much money out of the brands as possible. And three, but act as an assistant, so scheduling in that work, arranging the content, and dealing with the contracts and legal side. Now, when you're starting out on an influencer campaign, first thing to do is definitely reach out to the influencer. Are you working with them because you think they're right? They resonate with your product or your audience? Definitely do see it as a bit of a sales pitch, because what you'll find is if there's an influencer that you're really interested in and they're maybe got a slightly bigger following, or you can see they're already working with brands, they are getting messaged on a daily basis. You've got to think about kind of small brands that have in-house teams that are direct messaging the influencers. You've got agencies like Seek that are also reaching out to influencers to try and work with them on a daily basis and leverage client deals and expand their network. You've got platforms. So a lot of influencers, especially in what we class as micro influencers, so someone with maybe 40,000 followers, 10,000 followers, they actually may have signed up to a platform that's blasting them out all of these available jobs all the time. It can be quite overwhelming. So they're getting emails, they're getting DMs, people commenting. So you really do need to get a bit of an idea. Sorry, I'm getting so many private messages as well. Yeah, so when I'll try and hit your points there. So what level of influencer do you begin with? Now, we have a methodology internally. So you probably heard of CRM. So customer relationship management. We have an IRM methodology for all of the brands we work with. So essentially, who are the people within your existing network that may have pockets of influence that you can leverage? So if they've already engaged with the product before, they already follow you, it's more likely that they're going to want to work with you than if they don't. So I think actually putting together a bit of a strategy, a kind of an influencer relationship strategy of, okay, this is who we want to work with now or in the future. Can we engage with them on a more organic level to start with, and actually just create conversation, support them, and just to try and create a bit of a relationship, really. But I'd honestly say that when you're looking for influencers to work with for a specific campaign, have a look at what they've been doing in the past. So, a good thing to look for is, have they worked with the same brand more than once over time, especially if you're a B2C brand, because if you're trying to drive conversions or sales online, if a brand works with someone and it's successful, they're probably going to do it again. So that's one of the things that I would look for is repeat business. If you get an influencer and you're looking at, they've got great content, and they don't seem to work with the same brands often, or they kind of seem to be working with brands all in kind of different markets, I'd be a little bit wary there. I mean, I won't go into too many details, but we had a recent consulting project with an extremely large clothing brand that worked with an influencer with she had in the realms of kind of 14-15 million followers, and we knew that it wasn't going to work. You know, her engagement was great. She was getting, you know, a minimum of 250,000 likes per picture. But one of the benefits of dealing with management or agencies is they know some of the influencers that have high engagement, high follower rates, but don't necessarily convert on the e-commerce space. So you've really got to be careful about what your brand, your objectives are from a campaign. So is it just awareness? If that is the case, especially if you're in the B2B space, then maybe that's not such an issue. Hello? Oh, I don't know if that was a question or just some encouragement. But yeah, to directly to answer your question, what level of influencer would you work with to begin with? Honestly, I think it's like any other channel. So when you're looking at influencer marketing, it's got to be part of your wider marketing mix. I wouldn't rely on it as a single channel for traffic, for example. You know, it should be treated like any other channel. So I'd say definitely start smaller. So with slightly more smaller followings, with slightly better niches, you know, more zeroed in niches, and test it. Because I think another common mistake we see with brands is it's all well and good having an amazing influencer strategy. So, you know, you identify a pocket of influencers you want to work with. You've got the right product. It resonates with them. You know that their audience is your target customer. And, you know, product goes out, maybe the content gets shot, the content gets posted, and the traffic comes in. You see the results on your Google Analytics, but what are you actually doing with that traffic? What was the end goal? So have you captured data? Have you got their emails? Have you invited them to a Zoom call? Have you, what are you actually doing to captivate the audience once the traffic is driven? Because there are different types of influencers, don't get me wrong, that, there's accounts that we work with that you do have what we call kind of like it's just direct ROI. If they post something that's relevant to their audience, it is going to sell. And you should definitely speak to agencies. If you're at that level where you're willing to spend, 10K plus per month on influencer marketing, you need to be speaking to an agency and getting an idea of who those types of individuals are within your niches. It's a lot easier to find in more established e-commerce sectors. So, we know who those people are within fashion, within, beauty, kind of FMCG, food and beverage, those types of areas. It's slightly harder if you're looking at direct ROI in higher value, maybe products that need a bit more consulting. So for example, interior design or any products kind of for home renovations, things like that. It's a bit more consultative. So you might want to see if you can measure success in a different way. Maybe it could be by consultation bookings, quotations, something a little bit softer rather than a direct, e-commerce ROI. Just watching some of these messages coming in. How to message the initial contact? Definitely direct message, 100%. That's, if you're looking at a social media influencer, 100% direct message them initially. Two reasons why. One, you're more likely to speak to them directly. On an email, a little bit less likely. Two, it is their platform where they are most comfortable, where they're native. So again, you can have a chat with them. It can be live, it can be back and forth. I think a point of difference, just to note on the communication side, is these are real individuals. Now, not everyone's the same, but I do think if you can actually take that chat offline, so, actually give them a call, or even better, not during lockdown period, but even better, meet them for a coffee, if you're local, and actually create a real relationship. What you'll find is you'll get more out of that relationship. So not just in the campaign itself, but don't be shy to say, hey, look, we really want to work with you, or do you actually know anyone else that is relevant for us. And, you know, don't be asked for the referrals. Is the best way to build relationships just by getting lost in Instagram or YouTube, sending a DM or tagging them in your posts? Great point. So again, part of that influencer management piece is, you know, if you have a campaign, so say you've got a hard launch date, I would advise that you speak to as many influencers as possible within the niche. So get that plan, speak to as many as possible, because the reality is, you've got to remember, if it's Instagram direct message, for example, you could end up in that other inbox and they don't even see your message. So, you know, you really do need to be reaching out to quite a few of them to make sure it's a numbers game, just kind of like any sort of sales. So you need to be reaching out to as many as possible, and then effectively just having a bit of a CRM, like even if it's just using Excel or Google Sheets of, okay, these are the people we're contacting, these are the followers, these are their contact details. You know, if they have got a phone number, if they have got an email, definitely do that. But I'd say that with an influence campaign with a hard stop date, you need to have options. And like I said, when you do end up speaking to an influencer directly, I'd make sure you maximize getting the information from that individual as much as possible. So, okay, who have you worked with in the past? Ask them if they've got any data as well with who they've worked with in the past. A lot of them do. As you go up the chain to people that are actually earning a living from this, so this is all they do, they will send you their brand pack. So it will give you examples of campaigns they've done in the past, typically, maybe some statistics, ideally. Ask them what sort of brands they've worked with in the past that have done well, what hasn't, what type of content resonates with their audience. And pricing is a big one as well, and we'll definitely come on to that. So what is the actual cost of an influencer? Because I think that was the title, so we should probably touch on that. With your, what's the time? How are we doing for time? Just want to make sure that I leave enough time in the end for
11
for questions.
Our time, so I think you're doing well. Another 15-20 minutes, maybe.
15-20, yeah, cool, that's fine. I think with that initial kind of period of reaching out, you've got to look at it, influencer marketing, as a longer term kind of channel. Like, you know, I do think that the biggest kind of failures we see is when someone just says, I'm going to try posting with an influencer in my space. If it doesn't work, I'm not going to continue. And just to go back to my point that I was just talking about there, you've got to make the content work for the influencer and for you as a business. So again, there's a reason these guys have a following. They've built up a following over time within a specific niche of individuals, or maybe not. Maybe they are a slightly more generic kind of, we call them lifestyle influencers, but essentially they built a following for some reason. These people are following them and giving that individual permission to show them content. So don't abuse it. You know, the fact of the matter is that influencer will have content that resonates with that audience. If it matches with your brand, then great. And it doesn't necessarily have to be from an aesthetic point of view. It could be topic, it could be the kind of style of image, but just don't be afraid to talk to them. Like, they're literally just normal individuals. But in terms of payment specifically, I definitely do think it's a case-by-case basis. I mean, it's the Wild West. You know, some influencers will definitely take advantage of the fact, especially if you're working with startups, will definitely take advantage of the fact that they maybe know that you haven't been doing influencer marketing in the past. So just remember, it's part of a wider marketing spectrum. So if your own social media isn't really up to scratch, just remember two things. Number one, the influencer is going to look at your social media platforms and say, hey, do I want to be working with this business? Does the brand association with this business work for me? And then number two, once the campaign's actually been ran, people are going to be flooding, ideally, hopefully, flooding to your pages. So whether that be your website, your social media pages, your blogs, your YouTube channel, whatever specific kind of, you know, kind of where you're trying to drive the traffic. Now, remember that, you know, if it isn't up to scratch or isn't built to convert, and you're not, you know, really confident in the way that you already look as a business, it's probably not worth throwing fuel on the fire. So I'd say get the foundations in place from a social media standpoint, from a web standpoint, or wherever you're looking to capture that individual, and make sure that your content on your own platforms is there ready to capture that audience. Otherwise you're going to lose some of the value. And we also see that where people think, oh, you know, doesn't matter that my social media is a bit average, but we're just going to throw it on the biggest influencer in the country's page. It just doesn't really work. So it's kind of in tandem. And what you'll also find, if you make that investment in your own brand and your own platforms, influencers will start to kind of, you know, reach out to you anyway, proactively. So I think again, definitely compensate fairly. I wouldn't you know, there's a lot of businesses, and we go in, and the first thing they say that it's very common with large fashion businesses, not naming any names, and they say, look, we never pay any influencers. We don't pay. It's kind of like a badge of honor. Like, we don't pay for influencers. Two things that's wrong with that. Number one, you probably are paying. You're either paying in cost of goods, you're paying in time to deal with them, but there's still a cost to the business. So I'm not saying there's no cost. However, typically the influencers that convert the best know their value. So actually, by that saving from kind of, you know, we don't pay, you're probably cutting yourself off from some of the best influencers in the market within your niche. So you do, it is give or take. Can you say more about how to make it work for the influencer other than payment? 100%. So ads are, you know, I don't know what the stats are on it, you know, this ad blindness kind of, you know, people just kind of go through and automatically ignore ads. Essentially, that they're becoming kind of immune to social media ads, mainly because on average it's 1 in every 3 posts on the major platforms. I think it's between 3 and 5 posts, which is just crazy. What you'll find is, if you look at platforms like TikTok, and, you know, they're kind of approaching the kind of billion active users mark now worldwide. One of the reasons that's so compelling to kind of, you know, major advertisers is how you can place an ad or your product within the feed, and it is an ad placement, but it doesn't look or feel like an ad to the consumer. Now, when you've got a larger influencer, they have this kind of, similar to a business kind of having CSR activities, like, you know, you kind of have to do enough content for your audience to warrant being able to put the odd ad, because especially in the UK, they do have to declare whether a product is gifted or whether there's a little ad. You'll see it says ad before the text typically, and they try and get creative in ways to kind of not have to show that it's an ad. But essentially, by making your content work for them, it's actually within the IRM strategy. I saw someone saying that they were I've got a private message here saying they've got a food business, for example, a restaurant is a good example. So actually creating content opportunities for the influencer, because you've got to remember, just like a journalist, an influencer they earn their money by entertaining or capturing their audience on social media, so or on a blog or within a community. So they need content to put out to their audience. If you're providing an amazing content opportunity for them, or something interesting to their audience, that is value. So, you know, whether that's an experience, we're seeing a huge rise last year, prior to COVID, obviously, of kind of experiential influencer events. So what brands will actually do is invite people to a venue. This is really prominent in London. Invite multiple influencers to one event in London, and actually, whether that be gift their product or have kind of sets, kind of, you know, content opportunities for the influencers, because they're all looking for different you know, ways to engage their audience. And quite honestly, there are influencers that people follow them just for product and service advice. We were having a chat before the call about you know, B2B businesses and how kind of difficult it is within the influencer space. I noted a few things down that we were chatting about. So number one, in terms of value to you as a brand, So like I said, creating content opportunities for them, fantastic. They need it. They're constantly looking for content opportunities. But actually in the B2B space, what we've seen brands use influencers for is actually just using them for content creation, if that makes sense. So using an influencer to really basic example would be the FAQ section of a website. So you've got a company, you're selling something, there's something that always goes wrong with it, or is difficult to set up. Actually engaging with an influencer to do the how-to or to answer that question, maybe in video form, you can actually use them as the content creator. And what you'll find is sometimes they're even cheaper than hiring, models and a videographer and a photographer to generate that content. That is what they do day in, day out, and they do it very kind of cheaply, if I'm honest. So you can actually bring your content cost down and get the indirect benefit of their audience and the brand awareness piece. So you're not actually using the influencer for that. You're using them for the content. So it's the creator side, if you like. Next thing, using them for their knowledge, 100%. If you're, I don't know, talking about videography and photography, if you're a creative studio, you shoot videos for digital marketing agencies, you are in the video sphere, so you need to be an authority in that space. So you might have an influencer within that space. So for example, one of the gents that we outsource some of our food videography to, he is in his own right a food and drink photography and videography influencer. So we know when we work with him and he's shooting, these beautiful product shots of a gin bottle turning around with the kind of water dripping down the side, makes you want to have a drink at 10 o'clock in the morning. He's also probably going to post the behind the scenes video on his YouTube about how he shot it. And we actually see some sales come from it. And it's crazy. And we can track those sales back to his YouTube channel. It's absolutely crazy. I'm just going to read some of the questions really quickly. Audrey, do you have anything, just while I'm reading these, that you'd like me to answer for yourself, that you've seen? Because I know you had some questions being thrown at you prior to the chat.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like you've touched on it, but I guess, is there anyone that shouldn't use influencer marketing? You touched on it by saying if your social media isn't up to scratch, then probably not the right time. And now I was a bit doubting about B2B, because I have a B2B client right now. We're an agency. And one of our clients is B2B, and we were considering influencer marketing, but there's not many examples. But it sounds like you can. I guess,
What's the sector?
Pardon?
What's the sector? Is it technology?
They're actually in food manufacturing. So they make a lot of ingredients for consumer-facing brands. They have consumer-facing brands too. But the people that we're looking at is they make food ingredients.
Yeah, so again, dependent on, without getting into too much detail about that client, but
yeah,
where do they get their business from? So would their potential client search for what they provide on Google, for example? I presume so. So, XY supplier. So if you look at it more from an SEO strategy, so where is the consumer, first of all? They're not really on social media. Well, they've got to be somewhere. If someone doesn't know you, they're going to be looking somewhere. So let's say it's not on social media and they're just Googling it. I'll tell you what comes up at the top of Google: videos. The top of Google is usually videos from content creators from YouTube. Twitter gets indexed at the top of Google. So what I'm saying there is you can use prominent accounts or quality content creators to kind of hack the Google ranking, not just getting the direct. I think that the main problem you have with influencer marketing is what are the indirect benefits of using an influencer. So number one, when we work with startups, so smaller startups, and they're saying, look, we've got like little to no budget, but we know we need to be doing some influencer marketing. We can gift some product and we get this long list of 100 names. They're like, we could gift this product to all of these influencers, but we were a bit worried that we weren't getting anything back. First thing my team will do is actually put them into that spreadsheet. Obviously, it kind of doubles up with Helena's question about how do you sift through these influencers at first glance. So you can use tools that check engagement rates and things like that. But again, you've got to make your own mind up and kind of, there's Chrome extensions, for example, you can Google that give you influence engagement metrics, and you want to be looking at people. Ideally, the holy grail is kind of the 10% plus mark is the holy grail for micro influencers, but engagement isn't everything. Just because someone's really highly engaged doesn't mean that they've got an engaged audience with intent to buy. So you've got to be a bit careful there. And I know that kind of confuses things, and we can maybe touch on that in a bit. But I definitely look at, if there's someone with a really low engagement rate, like, below 1%, you can just push them aside initially, unless they've got amazing value in their content. But the first thing we look for is actually, do they have evergreen channels? So Instagram, unfortunately, once they've posted it, it's gone within a few days. These influencers are posting very often, and they've kind of earned the right to do that within the algorithm. People want more content. They're more of a TV channel. So 2 ways you can combat that. Number one, get them to post more than once over a period of time, and maybe build that into the agreement. And again, in terms of just touching on that, contracts and things like that, if you're spending a lot of money, definitely get contracts in place with the influencers. If you're gifting someone, an email exchange and an agreement, I think, will suffice in the initial stages. But again, if you can formalize it a little bit more, you're just protecting yourself to make sure you get something back from it. But it's very unlikely. We've had it, don't get me wrong, but it's very unlikely an influencer will agree to something and then not do it. It's unlikely. However, we do see it, so you just need to try and protect yourself. But with these evergreen channels, essentially, once that post is gone, you're pretty limited to what more value you can extract from that post on a platform such as Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. If you're looking at platforms like Pinterest or YouTube or blogs, there's other value that's there. That post will be getting views not just today, but maybe in a year. And the reason for that is, effectively, it's anything search engine based. So YouTube is a video search engine. Pinterest is a picture search engine, and you can link back to your content there. Blogs, obviously, pretty much answer the world's questions on the internet. So, there's different ways. I mean, I can tell you now, if there's anything that I do say within this hour, probably not so far, but if anyone asks a good question, I do answer it well. I'll be chopping that up, putting it into audio, putting it onto my LinkedIn in audio form so people can't see my face. I'll be transcribing it into a blog. I'll be getting as much value out of that piece of content as possible. And you should do that with your influencers that you work with as well. So reuse their content, pre-agree that. Do be careful when you're working with the bigger influencers that you pre-agree it, because you can get pinged with kind of license fees. So if you have an influencer take a picture of your product, send it to you, you can't just stick them on a billboard. You can't just, use it in your POS. You need to really be clear about where you're using those images. And if you do it up front, they're probably not going to have a problem. But if you do it after the fact and they are managed, you're going to get a call from the manager and saying, hey, listen, you didn't specify you were going to put me on TV. You didn't specify you were going to put me on your channels, and you could get pinged with a bit of a fee. I'm just going to have a quick read. How do you differentiate to an influencer that knows their value and charge for it versus an influencer that charges because they have a large following? So yeah, definitely, do they have evergreen value? Do have a look at their engagement. Definitely look at if they've worked with a brand more than once. Even if they're not competing, be careful that you don't, hurt the relationship with the influencer. But if it's a bigger brand, add the people on LinkedIn in the social media department and ask them how they got on. It's just like a job reference. Can you put me in touch with anyone from a brand you've worked with? If it is, getting into a bit more money, the better they are, the more open they will be. However, you've got to appreciate that they are busy and they're getting approached by a lot of brands. So there's that fine line of being kind of competitive to get your product or your service on their pages versus, I hope that answers the question, but I'm just going to quickly have a quick look through. Chrome extension, I will share with you right now. This is one. Flipping this around. what if your brand lends itself to be an influencer? How is an influencer typically made? Lovely question. So I would argue that every brand should have that outlook. You should look at yourselves as every brand should look at themselves as a kind of a media outlet. You know, everyone is putting out some sort of content and putting out some sort of message. And if you're not present, you're also putting out a message that you probably don't care, or you're maybe not open for business. I am going to say that because I own a digital marketing agency and that's how we make our money. But I genuinely do believe it. So you just got to think about your channels. So we have an omni-channel approach. So we believe that it doesn't take that much more effort to be on all of your major relevant platforms. So definitely don't be scared to reuse content across your different channels. How do you become an influencer? I mean, the biggest influencers of old were built due to niche. So real quality content that is focused on a niche and is shared within that niche, and they grew that way. Then we had a period of, that's always going to be the case, but then we had a period of collaboration. So if, you know, basically one micro influencer works with another micro influencer, then they have cross pollination of audiences, and then they grow and they grow, and then you just kind of got this elite, definitely in the YouTube world in the UK, of kind of YouTubers that all work with each other, and if they picked someone they would become a massive influencer. And again, we're talking about on the macro side there. Now it's all about short form virality, thanks to programs, you know, areas like TikTok and Instagram stories and things like that. So it's all about shares. So I think it's good to meet you, Chris. Thank you. We'll definitely connect. It's definitely it's more a case of what is your content strategy. So, you know, and if you are looking to become an influencer, again, can you give me any insight into what the industry is, Tara? Because it might be able to give you a bit more direct advice, but effectively just leverage your content. So, you know, higher quality content is ideal. I do think because of this kind of lockdown period, you know, even a Zoom call with, you know, average video, average audio, sitting upstairs hiding away from the dogs so they don't bark and annoy everyone, it is definitely more accepted now to have lower quality content with high value information. Nobody cares, you know, and if again, it is the cost of shooting a video that's good enough is on an iPhone is more than good enough. You know, just don't sit in the wind. Make sure you check that people can hear you and that there's a light on. You know, very simple. And if you're talking to the right audience, you know, and the information you're sharing is valuable. What I would make sure you do if you're looking to grow your audience as an influencer or as a brand in general, is just remember that not everyone likes Zoom. Not everyone likes video. Not everyone likes audio. Not everyone likes written word. So why not cross-pollinate your platforms with a variety really of forms of content. I've got a couple of questions that I had asked to me in the chat. How do you get to work with a high quantity of influencers, or would you recommend it's better to work with fewer, bigger influencers or lots of micro influencers? Great question. It really does depend on the aim and the brand. If a rule of thumb would be a smaller engaged audience is more likely to engage with the full campaign. So, you know, whether that's the seeing the content, because there's higher engagement, effectively it gets more views, it gets more likes, it gets more shares, it's more likely to be seen. So typically the value of, say, 10 influencers with 10,000 followers that get 1,000 likes per picture is, you know, 10x the value of someone with 100,000 followers that gets sub 10k likes per picture. That is true. However, it's a lot more work. You've got to deal with 10 different humans that move, die, leave, don't message you back. It's a bit of a nightmare. But for me, it's just about constantly testing. So there's no silver bullet. If you ever speak to someone who says, this is the way to do influencer marketing, it's just not true. Algorithms change on platforms, forms of content change, pandemics happen. You can't predict what the best way for a business is going to be. But like I said at the start of the call, influencer marketing is just another channel. So what is the full funnel? If you're a do you have any advice on working with influencers products that maybe willing to share products which are not cool, like dating apps, personal health? Yeah, of course. And we can come back to that. So there's always someone that thinks it's cool, number one. But yeah, we can come back to that. The full spectrum of a marketing campaign is effectively, if we just look at it as awareness, so if they don't know about you, they can't buy from you. Trust, so how are you getting them from becoming aware of your product to trusting your product to part money with their own money even if it's in a B2B business, parting from money for services or products. And how do you move them down that funnel and then actually retain them and encourage loyalty and engagement over time? And you can use influencers for any part of that funnel. So, awareness, very obvious, use the following. Trust, if the influencer's using it, maybe I would also like using it because I trust or follow that influencer. Obviously, that can backfire. I've got a question here. Have you seen any major horror stories with influencers? I'll give you two quick ones. Number one, I said about earlier, macro influencer, high charge, very little traffic. Again, probably in that case, it was through kind of ad fatigue. So they do so many ads that the audience is just like, oh God, it's just another ad. Like, I'm not clicking on this. So you need to be wary of that. The other story, really good friend of mine, and I'm trying to think of a story that's good to tell now, but effectively just be aware that these people are human. So if you do have maybe a non-profit, or you've got definitely if you've got regulated products, especially if you're talking about personal health, what you don't want is to deal with an influencer that maybe is a bit volatile in their personal life, especially if they're a bit of a bigger influencer, and you do a personal health campaign with them. They're talking about mental health, or they're talking about immunity, and then they go and throw a party in the middle of lockdown and it's in the sun. Could happen, has happened. I just think you need to be aware that this is a slightly more risky form of marketing, but with huge upside that's available. So you are dealing with humans. So look at their history, look at the past, just double check that the influencers you're working with are on brand. But don't get me wrong, just because they might be a little bit more, when I say, volatile, in this particular instance, that particular influencer has a great audience. He's loved for the fact that he's a bit more volatile, and it works. And actually, they're in the press, and so for consumer products, I actually think he's a perfect example of who you'd want to be with. But if you're looking at something that's a bit more serious, regulated, or definitely if you're talking about anything to do with health, as I can see in the chat, I think that's something you need to be wary of. I've just got another private message here. Kind of similar to what I was saying before. So is there any other value other than awareness that you see when running influencer campaigns? You mentioned Google. How can you leverage this? So in that skimming, I think it was Helen that asked the question earlier about how to kind of sieve through Helena Chan. And the thing we do is we put them in that spreadsheet, and we look at all the channels that they're on, and we see if they've got any evergreen value channels, so maybe YouTube or a blog. And specifically with the blog, if they do have a blog, have a look at, and again, I'm really sorry if this is too technical, but their domain authority of their blog. So if you type in domain authority checker, they're going to get a score out of 100. Compare a few sites. Domain authority is essentially how much does Google trust the website. Every platform has a different metric, but if you compare them like to like, if they have a blog, it's high domain authority, they're going to create you some great content, and they're going to link back to your website. It could help to improve your ranking. So that's another leverageable piece from influencer marketing. Fire out the questions, because I think we are at 48 minutes past. So any other questions, I'm more than happy to take them.
I had one privately come into me. Can you talk more about your cost structure and the different types of influencers you have access to? And I guess to build on that, do you, as a influencer marketing agency, do you feel like you guys can reach out to anyone, or do you have this network that's a really supportive, kind of already vetted group that you always go to?
Yeah, so pricing structure, just to be quick, is dependent on the overall marketing play. So most of the influencer marketing we action on a day-to-day basis, and on a day-to-day basis is part of a wider marketing plan. So again, we'd be running their Google PPC campaigns, maybe some remarketing on Facebook, influencer marketing, and essentially it would be priced up as part of an ongoing marketing campaign. However, we do campaigns, so maybe a launch or a product launch or something specific. So typically as an agency, we would be charging for the knowledge and the consultancy of how to run that campaign. We'd be charging for how to maximize that campaign. So, okay, influencers post the product, come through to the website. You haven't got a Facebook pixel installed in your site. You're not capturing any of their data, so you can't remarket to them. So your conversion will be lower. Hypothetically, you haven't got abandoned cart email set up on an e-commerce site. So what do you need to capture the value of an influencer marketing campaign? Let's say all of that is sorted, then yeah, essentially our time is what we charge for to essentially manage that process and effectively ensure that you get a good deal. I mean, don't get me wrong, we leverage our influencer relationship. So in terms of what we have access to as an agency, so Seek has an influencer database of, I don't know if Kika's still in the chat, but I don't know how many we've got. I think it's about 12 million around the world. So it's a huge database. We've been building it for 4 years. However, that's in multiple languages, multiple countries, multiple sectors, multiple ages, multiple platforms. And we've definitely not worked with 12 million influencers, but we've used technology to get that data. Of the influencers that we work with on a regular basis, of course, we've got, I'd say, as a senior management team within Seek, key relationships are with influencers themselves. So we, again, we're really lucky, we work with some amazing brands. We've inherited relationships from them. We've created relationships because of campaigns. And then we've got a really amazing team that have a lot of personal network within kind of your London, Manchester core. I'm in Brighton now at my family's house, and Brighton just happens to be the capital of Europe for YouTube, for example. So really lucky with personal networks there. But in terms of cost and how it would be structured, it's typically a campaign cost. We'd estimate what sort of kind of reach and size of influencers and the results as a result of that campaign versus that amount of money that you have in terms of a budget. Now, the first thing we would do from a strategy level is say, is influencer marketing the right thing for you? What are you actually trying to do? What happens if you spent that £1,000 on pay-per-click? Have you tried pay-per-click? Have you tried Facebook marketing? Have you done influencer marketing before? Has anyone else in your industry been doing it? And just kind of starting to, get a feel for kind of why they're doing it and the cost. Sorry, I've forgotten the rest of the question. What cost, pricing, and how do we work? Was it? Sorry, Audrey.
I found it. And the influencers you have access to. I think you pretty much answered that one. Another new one did come in, and it's, as a brand, what is more beneficial, one-off Instagram ads or working with influencers on an affiliate program?
Yeah, so both. I mean, a one-off Instagram ad, again, you've got to know that they're the right influencer. I mean, again, a brand affiliate, I think what you mean there is typically more getting paid as like a percentage of sales. So what you'll actually find is the smallest influencers will probably do it because, again, they're willing to take anything they can get. Then you get this kind of area of influencers that maybe just started their career, maybe their engagement isn't that high. They'd be very resistant to a referral kind of affiliate payback scheme because they kind of see the value in their content, their time, the delivery, and they've got a kind of a rate card that's a bit more rigid. So you're actually finding the kind of micro influencer community paying people kind of commission as a result of sales is less prominent. But then as you get bigger. So the biggest influencers love it because they know the value of what they can bring. So for example, where I'm sitting right now, around the corner from me, Saffron Barker, for example, huge influencer, was on Strictly Come Dancing, kind of went across from YouTube into the mainstream, similar to what Joe Sugg did the year before. Literally just come out with I think it's In the Style range. Now, she will be compensated not just for doing it, but for the level of sales, because she knows that her engaged audience will buy that product. But Nimisha, just in answer to your question, if someone is going to be willing to, or you can work with someone over a sustained period, that's when you'll see better results. So that one kind of drop in the ocean post, what happens if it just was at the wrong time and you know, something went viral, you know, about the police in America, or at the same, you know, could other factors have affected the effectiveness of that campaign? Maybe. So by spreading the length of time you work with the influencer, you're lowering your risk, number one. And also you're instilling trust. I mean, if someone actually uses your product and you can develop them more into a brand ambassador, and that's what we're talking about with IRM, if you generate that relationship, you work with them over a slightly longer period of time, their audience is going to feel that too. So, you know, you can really start to kind of take more value from the audience and bring that across. The other area that I had, someone wrote it earlier, was it came in on a private. Yeah. So what about after you've ran a campaign? So, you know, you've reached out to a few influencers, maybe you've gifted them a product, or for whatever reason, they're posting your product. Great. However, then what? So I think it goes back to my previous point. So how are you capturing that traffic? What are you doing to engage them when they come through? I think no one should ever run an influencer marketing campaign without a Facebook pixel set up on their site. I mean, it's just absolutely crazy. The cost of running remarketing ads for a startup on Facebook, you can be running at £3 a day. You know, again, it's only as good as the traffic that you put into the pixel. So we call it like a seasoned pixel, like if you've got loads of influencer traffic coming in. So I'll give you a quick example. We had a clothing brand, 0 followers, started at 0, launched from scratch, probably about 2.5 years ago. When they first started out, they used to use influencers for content exchange. So essentially gifting the influencers, they take content in wearing the clothes, and then they'd reuse that content for their feed. That was the main value. The indirect value for them was that obviously they're getting some brand awareness, and they had a Shopify site that was set up really well, and they had a pixel in the site, etc. But they didn't have enough budget to even spend a penny on that. It was just, okay, we can afford for this product, we're going to send it out, we're going to do that. Then they started to move into events, so experiential, bringing influencers together, capturing video content and themselves. Again, still a content opportunity, indirect value of having the influencers tagging the brand. They then got listed in Topshop because one of the buyers followed one of the influencers that they were working with, so there was an indirect benefit. Absolutely fantastic. And they ended up rolling out through 7 stores, I think. At this point, their e-commerce sales were, you know, in the few thousand a month. They started doing a bit of what we call retargeting or remarketing, where so all of this kind of traffic that was coming through the influencers, they would then serve those individuals ads on platforms such as Facebook and on Instagram. Then it started to be like, okay, great, we can see what type of influencers do work and which don't, and not all of them did. Not all of them were driving great traffic, but they all had great content. So regardless of who they worked with, they knew they were getting the value from the content. I'd always advise, if someone's not got good content, you know, probably not the best, you know, they're probably not the best to be working with. Very rarely do I see an influencer with really bad content that engages very well from an e-commerce or from a conversion point of view. They then started paying influencers, paying to even fly them out to on location, started to get a little bit bigger. Sales were going from kind of like 10,000 to 20,000 a month, 30,000 a month. And again, the more traffic they put in at the top end from influencer, the better the remarketing was doing and the better their kind of brand awareness and direct sales were doing. They then started to get recognized by publications as a result of influencer marketing. So they were featured on, style magazines. They were featured in various online publications, which then in turn helped their SEO, which helped them rank higher. So effectively their business was built on influencer marketing. Coronavirus came in, every top shop shut, and it was only about online. They could only sell online. So effectively, if they didn't have that online foundation of influencer into a funnel of email, text, Facebook remarketing, and managing that community, they would have been dead in the water. They would have been dead in the water. But luckily, they had a foundation of influencers and a database, internally, that they could leverage. So I just wanted to give you an idea of, it can be the savior for some businesses, but I think in most industries now, the way we pitch influencer campaigns to first-time buyers of influencer campaigns is mainly based on the content, not about the reach. That's how we tend to test it. So, okay, you're going to spend £500 on a video shoot or a photo shoot. Why not use someone with an audience? And I think that's the easiest way, the way we sell it as an agency to a small startup first time influencer buyer, if you like.
So helpful. Thank you so much for doing this, Charlie. I feel like we're just coming up on our last minute, and it looks like we had a few questions that were answered, but Olay, if you want to bring it onto Twitter, I'm sure Seek will be happy to answer on their Twitter feed. I don't want to keep you guys for any longer than it's just before lunchtime. I guess there's some Americans in here too, so maybe breakfast time for you guys. So we'll wrap it up, but I've just put in the links on the side to join our Slack group. And we also, just for any food and drink brands in here, we have an free online festival coming up called the Disruptors versus the Disrupted. The link is also in the chat box. We'd love to see you there. And next week we have another one of these, and it's actually focused on how to build and manage a startup with the guys at Underpinned. But again, thank you so much, Charlie. That was killer. That was just really
amazing. No, thanks. It's difficult just to talk for so long, but yeah, if anyone wants to email me if they have any further questions, more than happy to help. It's just Charlie, CHRLIE @cweek.co.uk, and I can see what I'm going to do. All of the private ones that I didn't get to answer, I'll copy them off, and I'll get the answers written by the team. I think there's someone in our team still in here, and I'll send them over, and we'll make sure everything gets answered, because there's some really great questions. Kika just put in the chat there. That's actually a blog post that runs through in a much more structured way what the actual value of influence marketing is, rather than me just making it up as I go along. But no, really good. I think these sessions are great, and looking forward to tuning in next week as well, Audrey. So good to chat.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, guys.